At a certain point, many ambitious people begin to experience something peculiar. You wake up before your alarm, and before you've even opened your eyes fully, your mind is already running through the day's tasks, the week's objectives, the quarter's targets. Your chest feels slightly tight. There's a low-grade tension in your shoulders that never quite goes away. You accomplish something you've worked toward for months, and for perhaps 30 seconds, there's satisfaction. Then, almost immediately, your mind pivots to the next thing. What was supposed to be a summit becomes just another base camp. And naturally, you tell yourself, this is good. This is drive. This is what separates those who achieve from those who merely dream. But here's what gnaws at you in quiet moments. No matter how much you accomplish, the feeling never changes. The urgency never subsides. It's as if you're running on a treadmill that keeps accelerating, and you can never quite catch your breath. You look at your list of achievements and feel nothing. Or worse, you feel a kind of hollowness, as if you've been chasing something that keeps receding the moment you approach it. And you wonder, with a tremor of fear you don't quite want to acknowledge, what if this never ends? But what if I told you that this exhausting drive isn't what you think it is at all? You see, most of what we call ambition isn't actually about building a future. It's about fleeing a present. The German philosopher Martin Heidegger spent much of his life examining the peculiar way human beings exist in time, and he noticed something disturbing. We have an almost constitutional inability to simply be. We're always ahead of ourselves, projected into a future that hasn't arrived, busily constructing plans and projects that will supposedly complete us, make us whole, finally allow us to rest. He called this structure being ahead of itself, and he saw it as one of the fundamental ways we flee from what he called our thrownness into existence. Think about what actually happens when you're driven by ambition. You're sitting at dinner with your family, but you're not really there. Your body is present, but your mind is 3 steps ahead, rehearsing tomorrow's presentation, strategizing next week's negotiation, calculating how this quarter's numbers will position you for next quarter's opportunities. The meal, the conversation, the laughter of your children. All of this is just a kind of background noise to the main event, which is always happening somewhere else, sometime later. It's like being perpetually hungry, even while you're eating. The food is right there in front of you, but you can't taste it because you're already thinking about the next meal, the better meal, the meal that will finally satisfy you. This is what Heidegger was pointing out when he talked about inauthenticity. Not that you're being fake or dishonest, but that you're not inhabiting your actual existence. You're living in a projected future that doesn't exist, fleeing from a present that does. And the cruelest part? The thing you're fleeing from is precisely what you are. Your actual concrete existence, here, now, in this body, in this moment, with its particular limitations and possibilities. The ambition feels like it's pulling you forward, toward something. But look more carefully. What's really happening is that you're being pushed from behind, away from something. And what you're being pushed away from is the simple, irreducible fact of your existence, which includes, and here's what we really can't face, your finitude, your death. Not as an event in some distant future, but as a constitutive element of what you are right now. Heidegger called this being toward death, and it's the one truth that our entire structure of ambition and projects is designed to help us forget. Because if you really faced your mortality, not intellectually, but in your bones, you'd have to confront a devastating question. Why am I building all this? For whom? To what end? Once you see this pattern, a lot of things start to make terrible sense. The way accomplishments turn to ash the moment you achieve them. The way no success is ever enough. The way rest feels like death, like falling into an abyss. Because rest would mean stopping, and stopping would mean being here. And being here would mean facing what you are. A finite being in time, constructing meaning in a world that doesn't inherently provide any. The ambition isn't failing you, it's doing exactly what it's designed to do, keeping you in perpetual motion so you never have to stop and look at where you actually are. It's like taking a drug to avoid feeling pain. The drug works, in its way. It keeps you numb. But the pain is still there, waiting, and the dose keeps needing to increase because you're building tolerance. One promotion isn't enough anymore. Neither is two. The business success that would have seemed like a fantasy 10 years ago now feels like barely adequate. The goalposts keep moving because they must keep moving. Because if they ever stopped, you'd have to stop too. And stopping is precisely what your entire structure of existence is organized to prevent. Let me give you an analogy. Imagine someone who's been running for years. Not for health or enjoyment, but running from something. Maybe they think they're running toward something, a destination, a goal. But really, they're running away. And they've been running so long that they've forgotten what they're running from. The running itself has become their identity. Their legs hurt. Their lungs burn. They're exhausted in a bone-deep way. But the thought of stopping is more terrifying than the thought of continuing. Because if they stop, they'll have to turn around and look at whatever they've been fleeing. And they've built their entire life around not looking. This is what's happening when you feel that relentless drive that won't let you rest. You're not ambitious, you're in flight. And the thing you're fleeing from isn't something external that's chasing you. It's the simple fact of being you, here, now, with nothing left to accomplish, nowhere to get to, nobody to become. Just this existence, in its irreducible therenness. Heidegger called this thrownness, Geworfenheit. You find yourself thrown into existence without having chosen it, without an instruction manual, without any inherent meaning or purpose provided from outside. And the terror of that is so profound that we construct elaborate systems of meaning, careers, achievements, recognition, status, to avoid ever having to face it directly. And this period of recognition, when you start to see through the ambition but haven't yet found anything else, can last quite a while. It's deeply uncomfortable. Things that used to motivate you stop working. The promotion you would have killed for a few years ago lands with a thud. You get the award, the recognition, the money, and you feel nothing. Or worse, you feel a kind of contempt for yourself for still caring at all. You watch yourself going through the motions, answering the emails, taking the meetings, making the presentations, and there's a new distance to it. You're doing it, but you're also watching yourself do it. And the person watching is exhausted and a little disgusted. Friends ask you what's wrong, and you can't explain it because nothing is technically wrong. In fact, by any external measure, things are better than ever. But internally, something has shifted. The machinery of ambition is still running, but the fuel that used to power it is running out. The usual response is to try desperately to recapture the drive you once had. You read books about peak performance, about finding your purpose, about igniting your passion. You try to reverse engineer motivation. You make vision boards. You set bigger goals. You tell yourself you just need to think bigger, aim higher, want more. But this doesn't work because you're trying to restart an engine that you've already seen through. It's like trying to be excited by a magic trick after the magician has shown you how it's done. You know now that the rabbit wasn't really in the hat. You can't unknow that. And all the motivational tactics in the world can't make you forget what you've glimpsed. That the ambition was never about the goals at all. It was about the running. And now that you've stopped running, even for a moment, you can't quite convince yourself to start again. I must warn you about something. This doesn't resolve quickly, and it doesn't resolve comfortably. You might be tempted to think I'm building to some kind of answer, some new framework that will make sense of it all and give you a different, better kind of ambition. A authentic ambition, maybe. A purpose-driven ambition. Something that feels more meaningful than the treadmill you were on. But that's just the same pattern dressed in different clothes. That's still fleeing. What actually happens, if you're willing to stay in this uncomfortable space long enough, is stranger and less satisfying than any answer could be. You don't find a new reason to run. You stop running. Not because you've arrived somewhere, but because you've realized there was nowhere to arrive. And when you stop, when you really stop, you find yourself in an extraordinary situation. You're here, just here, in this body, in this moment, in this inexplicable fact of existence. And it's not nothing. Let me tell you about someone I knew. He'd built a successful consulting practice. Not enormously successful, not famous, but successful by any reasonable measure. He was doing work he was good at, making more money than he needed, respected in his field. But he couldn't rest. He was always strategizing the next growth phase, the next market expansion, the next level of recognition. He told me once that he felt like he was on a train that couldn't stop, and he wasn't sure anymore where the train was going, but the thought of getting off terrified him more than the thought of riding it forever. Then his father died. Not suddenly, but after a long illness during which my friend visited him every weekend for months. Sitting in those hospital rooms, then hospice rooms, watching his father slowly leave the world, something shifted. His father, in the final weeks, seemed to let go of everything. Not in a tragic way, but in a way that was almost serene. He wasn't trying to accomplish anything anymore, wasn't trying to be anything, was just breathing, being, existing. One afternoon, my friend was sitting beside his father's bed. His father was asleep. The light was coming in through the window in a particular way, illuminating dust motes in the air, and my friend realized he couldn't remember the last time he had actually looked at light. Really looked at it, the way you look at something when you're not on your way to somewhere else. He wasn't grieving in that moment, wasn't strategizing or planning or projecting. He was just there, watching dust dance in afternoon light, and for the first time in years, he wasn't anywhere else, wasn't ahead of himself, wasn't behind himself, was just there. After his father died, he tried to go back to the business as usual. But he couldn't do it. The machinery still worked, but he couldn't quite take it seriously anymore. Not because it seemed meaningless in some nihilistic way, but because he'd glimpsed something else. What emerged wasn't a new ambition or a new project. It was a different quality of attention. He still worked, still did things, still had plans, but they sat differently now. They weren't existential. They were just things he was doing, not things that defined whether his existence was worthwhile. He told me it was like he'd been clenching a fist his entire life without realizing it. And now the fist had opened. Not because he'd decided to open it, but because he'd finally noticed he'd been clenching it. This is the thing that's almost impossible to describe, because it's not a new state or a new achievement. It's more like a recognition of something that was always there, but was obscured by all the noise of becoming. It's not the peace of having arrived. It's the peace of realizing there was nowhere to arrive. Not because existence is meaningless, but because meaning isn't something you construct through projects and achievements. It's something that's already present in the simple, inexplicable fact of being. Not the being of grand moments or peak experiences. The being of ordinary Tuesday afternoons, of breathing, of looking at trees, of washing dishes, of sitting. Heidegger called this authentic existence, not living for some future project, but inhabiting your actual existence, including its finitude, its limits, its groundlessness. And it's not exciting. That's what's so strange about it. It's not the thrill of a new goal or the satisfaction of an achievement. It's quieter than that, more ordinary. It's like the difference between the taste of food when you're distracted and the taste when you actually pay attention. Same food, radically different experience. So what do you actually do in the meantime while you're in this uncomfortable space between seeing through the old ambition and finding yourself in this quieter kind of existence? You do what needs doing. You work. You eat. You sleep. You fulfill your responsibilities. But you do it without the existential weight, without making it mean something about whether you're worthy of existence. You brush your teeth without it being evidence that you're building a successful life. You answer emails without them being steps toward some ultimate arrival. You have ambitions, maybe, but they're lighter. They're preferences, not mandates from the universe. And you watch, you observe, you notice when you're ahead of yourself again, when you're fleeing again, and you don't judge it or try to stop it forcefully. You just notice. And in the noticing, sometimes there's a loosening. And most importantly, you stop comparing. Stop comparing this moment to past moments that seemed more meaningful. Stop comparing your current state to where you think you should be by now. Stop comparing yourself to other people who seem to have figured out the ambition thing, who seem driven by pure purpose, who seem to know where they're going. Because maybe they do know where they're going, or maybe they're just running faster than you, and the running itself keeps them from having to look at what you're starting to see. Either way, it's not your concern. Your concern is here. This breath, this moment, this simple, unadorned fact of being alive right now. Not building towards some future aliveness. Just this, as it is. Paradoxically, it's only when you stop trying to accumulate moments into a meaningful life that you can actually inhabit any moment fully. It's only when you stop fleeing toward future achievements that you can be here for present existence. And this doesn't mean you stop doing things. You might do more things, in fact. But the doing isn't weighted with existential significance anymore. It's just what you're doing. Now, because you're here, and there's nothing else to be. Perhaps the reason ambition has become such a curse is that you've outgrown it. Not because you're better than other people, not because you're more evolved, but because you've seen through it. You've noticed that no achievement actually delivers what it promises. Not because the achievements are wrong, but because what they promise, completion, arrival, worthiness, isn't something achievements can provide. Those aren't things you achieve. They're things you are, or things you recognize you already were, beneath all the striving. And when the ambition falls away, not because you've killed it, but because you've seen through it, you're thrown back on what's actually here. This existence, this being, this simple, strange, inexplicable fact of being conscious, being alive, being here. And it's not nothing. It's not a void you need to fill with projects and achievements. It's fullness. Not the fullness of accumulated accomplishments, the fullness of presence itself. You were always complete. You just forgot for a while. You thought you needed to become something more than what you were. But you can't become more than being. You can only be it, or flee from it. And you've spent so long fleeing that just stopping feels like falling into an abyss. But it's not an abyss. It's ground, solid ground. The ground of existence itself. which was supporting you the whole time, even while you were running, especially while you were running. And now, finally, you can feel it beneath your feet. Not because you've arrived anywhere special, but because you've stopped pretending you needed to.